Hello, I'm Matthew Shorvok, the General Director of San Francisco Opera, and I am here with Berkeley-based and world-renowned composer John Adams as we bring his latest opera to life, Antony and Cleopatra, here at San Francisco Opera as part of our centennial season. Well, John, I'm so happy to be here with you, and as we are now preparing and we're in rehearsals for the opera, I wanted to ask you what it's like for you at this moment. You've spent now the last 4 years in this very intimate relationship between you and the work. It's been a very, very sort of one-on-one relationship. Now suddenly we have tens, if not scores of people engaged with this, from the cast to the conductor to the director, the designers. What's it like to be at that moment, and does it feel like a letting go of the piece?
Well, all of those things. It is true that I started this work on this 4 years ago. You asked me, you popped the question.
That's right.
In 2017, when we were doing Girls of the Golden West here. I immediately said yes. I don't even think I waited a day to say yes. And I think very shortly after that, I proposed the idea of Antony and Cleopatra. And unlike my other operas, which had various libretti, two wonderful libretti by Alice Goodman for Nixon in China and Death of Klinghoffer, and then very unique libretti that Peter Sellers assembled for Dr. Tomek. I thought I would work with a well-known collaborator, William Shakespeare. And so the first thing I had to do was to compress this enormous, sprawling epic with 50 characters and 30 scenes down to 2 acts. So that took better part of a year.
Well, can you talk a little bit about the genesis of the piece, John, in the sense of why Shakespeare, why Antony and Cleopatra? What appealed to you about that direction?
Well, in Girls of the Golden West, which I also wrote for the San Francisco Opera, we discovered in the course of our research that reciting Shakespeare was a popular form of entertainment during the Gold Rush.
Yes.
So we included a couple of very short scenes from Macbeth, and I found that setting those words was so stimulating to my musical imagination, and several people after hearing the opera said, why don't you write a whole Shakespeare opera? And Antony and Cleopatra had always been one of my special play that I loved maybe more than any of the others. And I can't quite explain why, because Antony and Cleopatra, it doesn't have quite the sustained eloquence that Hamlet has. It doesn't have the sort of cuddly young lovers or the comedy. It's a very unusual play, but what drew me to it was the fact that the main characters were older people. They were people who were in love, but who had been there and done that. Each of them has a past, and the past in some cases is kind of messy, and they do terrible things to one another. They betray each other. They're very modern. They're very psychological. And I was drawn to that.
I want to come back to the text setting, John, because I was one of those people who was just in awe of those Shakespearean scenes in Girls of the Golden West, and just how your music elevated that text, off the page and just sort of into this wonderful sense of meaning and energy. Do you find that it's a different approach to setting Shakespearean text, or is it very similar to setting any text and you're just looking for particular rhythms and shapes?
Well, I did want to use the Shakespeare text. I mean, there are all kinds of ways of approaching Shakespeare. You can take it and then have an original libretto that isn't the Shakespearean language. But I felt that this incredible beauty of the language was something that ought to be preserved. There were issues about words that we don't understand, we don't use. In some cases, I simply didn't use those words. I felt a certain freedom about trying to keep it coherent and intelligible to contemporary audiences. But I didn't have to do that much.
No.
I think it's pretty much 100% accessible. And the great thing, and I felt this, of course, when I set Alice Goodman's wonderful libretti, is when you have great language, it suggests musical ideas. You know, the shape of a phrase. Look, I'll give you a case in point from Dr. Atomic, the Batter My Heart sonnet by John Donne. Just those lines, you know, break, burn, shine, they suggested a kind of musical image for me, and that was the case throughout Antony and Cleopatra.
Your operas and so much of your work, John, reflects the world in which we're living, and there's an amazing intimacy of expression between music and the society in which that music is being made. And with Antony and Cleopatra, you are going further back in time than usual. Many of your opera topics are of the 20th century or close thereto. Do you still feel this very much as a work that is about our current society, or do you feel it's something more universal?
I think the fact that Shakespeare has always been important indicates that he is universal, and the subject matter clashes of personalities, the fights for power, the tragedy, and the comedy, you know, it transcends any particular historical moment. So, of course, that, you know, draws me to the drama. But I also, the reason I chose this opera is because it is so psychologically modern. And these people really are so much like the people that we encounter. You know, Caesar, I've seen Caesar every time I've picked up the newspaper, or whether it's some, you know, arrogant, get it right, you know, master of the universe from Silicon Valley, or whether, you know, it's somebody attacking Ukraine. You know, these things, they always have resonance in the world around us. So yes, it doesn't sound like a John Adams opera. It isn't Nixon in China or the death of Klinov. It's not something that happened 20 years ago. It happened 2,000 years ago. But that's why we do opera, because opera fundamentally operates on the mythic level. And the myths, the archetypes of this story are as modern as anything that we could imagine.